Recording.
Hi guys, hope you are having a lovely time at Tribes Together. I am with Stu and with Andy here, and we're continuing through, just chatting through some of our What is the Church series. First thing, Matthew 22, love God and love others, greatest commandment. What does this actually look like to inhabit this? I think sometimes with love, I think of like the things that are, there's certain ways that it's easy to love people. Like if you're an acts of service person, it's really easy to do that as an act of love. But I have a feeling that whenever we read that verse, that it's so much more than that. What does it look like to fully embody love?
I think Jesus is the one who says, I want you to love God and I want you to love people. Mm-hmm. And I think whenever we consider what does it look like to live like that, I think ultimately we need to learn what it means to become like him. He is the command giver, and also he's the best example of how to live in that way. And I'm really interested in the word become. Like, what does it look like for us to become like Jesus? And this word crops up throughout the scriptures, but in Ephesians 4, Paul talks about it like this. Ephesians 4 verse 15 says, instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become in every respect the mature body of him who is the head, that is the Christ. And we see throughout the writings of the New Testament that there's like a priority that should be in place in our lives, which is for us to become like Jesus. And this becoming, it's not an inevitable automatic thing. It doesn't just happen to us. It requires a kind of formation. And whenever we use that word, by formation, what we mean is being formed or shaped into something or into the image of someone. Like how a potter would shape clay into like a coffee cup, or how an artist would create a sculpture. It requires a kind of formation, a kind of a shaping. And like formation or shaping, it isn't just a Christian thing, it is ultimately a human thing. Like, we're constantly being formed, and we're being formed mostly by what we do daily and often. So if you are playing piano all of the time, like, you will become a world-class pianist.
Unless you're me.
Unless you're you and me as well. And like, if you spend all day on Instagram or TikTok or on whatever social media platform you use, you will probably be formed and shaped into the kind of person that is comparing yourself to other people, or is so concerned about living a life that's worth liking, you know. Mm-hmm. We do get shaped all the time. We use a phrase from a great writer called Annie Dillard often, who says, how we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. What we do every day shapes us over the long haul of our lives. Mm-hmm. And so if we want to be the kind of people that become like Jesus, we need to pay really close attention to what we are doing every single day, the habits, the patterns, the rituals that we engage in to focus on him. Mm-hmm. Or are we focusing way more on other things that take us away from him? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So we as humans are formational beings. We are formed by God, but we can also be formed by other things then as well.
Well, yeah, like there's this idea of spiritual formation, but there's also every other kind of formation that we can imagine, you know. Social media formation, you know, where I think this is interesting in some of the conversations I have with people about they want to grow in their faith, they want to hear God better, and I can't hear God. And, you know, one of my questions is, talk to me about your relationship to technology, for example. Because, you know, some of our friends who work in that field would tell you the exact number, precise number. We're going to ruin it tonight for you guys. Sorry, this video will be too long for many of you, because it'll be 7 minutes instead of 2.5. Yeah. Because our attention span is being curated, formed constantly to check out after 30 seconds or after 2 minutes or after, you know, whatever that length of time is. And then we think we present ourselves before the Lord for 5 minutes in the morning, go, God, this is your time, speak. And then we're like, I can't hear God. Yeah. When actually our lives have been formed in such a way that everything is instant. Yeah. And what I love and maybe get frustrated about God in is that he is not operating according to our whims. Mm. And if we want to learn how to hear God, and and how to love him, then we need to create space. I was just chatting to a friend last week who's lost her dad a couple of years ago, and her life has just been so full, and she's been flattened in the last couple of weeks with grief, because actually she's changed jobs and she's much more space in her life now. Yeah. And all of a sudden, what's in her soul is now appearing. Mm-hmm. And she's saying, why am I so angry and upset about losing my dad 2 years ago? I thought I'd dealt with this. But actually, and this is what she said, I think I've only now given myself the space to grieve. Mm. And so I think when it comes to loving God, loving people, the question I would have around that is around, well, what space do you have for either of those things? Mm. Because if we don't create the space for it, then there's no chance for us to actually grow in it or be formed in it, because our lives are so full with all sorts of other things. Yeah. Formation requires structure. Yeah. Like, it requires intention. So in our house, usually it's me, sometimes it's Dana, but almost every morning I'm out of bed making Dana coffee. I bring her coffee most mornings in bed. That's part of the form now of our marriage. Yeah. And, you know, that tiny act every day is an act of love. Mm. And it has formed our marriage. Mm. Whereas, and it requires intention, and, you know, there are lots of days when she'll watch this video and think, I do that to you too. And she totally does. But that's become part of what holds the love for our marriage. That it's not the grand one-off annual night away for an anniversary. It's the small decisions that are prioritized every day that hold our intentions and that form who we're becoming in every part of our lives. And so when it comes to our life with Jesus and our life with others, the question becomes, what are the small things that we do? Yeah. Not what are the big things that we do. Yeah. You know, I mean, come to church once a month, great. But that's not the thing. It's the everyday priority that actually and ultimately forms us. It's good.
Yeah. And something that I just remember you saying a lot as well is, like, one of the most spiritual things in our lives is our choices, you know, and that's kind of the thing I'm just thinking of with being formed. Like, there is a choice to it, you know, there's hope. It's not that you're just formed by something that you don't get to choose.
Well, what I would say, and we're maybe going over time here, but, like, is that whole idea of a life audit. That sounds so intense. Yeah. But, like, I do it regularly, you know, where I reflect on what are the things that take up most of my time? What are the things that occupy my mind most? What's my Rick Warren has this thing of his word first word, his word last word. It's just a really simple practice where the first thing he does in the morning is read a verse. The last thing he does at night is read a verse. Super simple, but it's just a tiny act of priority, that the first thing I do in the morning is I hear the word of God. The last thing I do at night is I hear the word of God. Watch what happens if you do that for 6 months. Yeah. Not 6 days. 6 months of intentional small things. It can revolutionize our life. Your choices are the most spiritual thing in your life.
It's good.
And what would that look like to be formed into something better? Like, what would that?
Yeah, I think there's two things, I think, in this conversation that are really important of how we become more like Jesus, and they are imitation and repetition. So really quickly, imitation, whenever you see, Jesus teaches the Sermon on the Mount and closes it off by saying, whoever hears these words and puts them into practice, they're like the wise builder. And Jesus wants us to, yes, hear what he says, but also do what he does. Yeah. And so whenever we look at the life of Jesus, we see not just somebody to worship, but we see an example that we can follow, a life to imitate. And so everything in the life of Jesus, his prayer life, his commitment to the supernatural, his commitment to justice, his commitment to community, his Sabbathing, his resting, all of those things we can imitate, we can do. And then we are also to repeat them over and over and over again. There is no formation without repetition, right? And we're seeing this. So Eliza just turned 1 and she's growing up so fast. But even as a 1-year-old, she is growing because of two things. She is mirroring things that Em and I do, and also she's kind of repeating them. She does them over and over and over again. And it's super cute, but also it is exactly the same for us as older, mature people, right? There's something about humans that need to engage in imitation, like mimicking something, mimicking someone, and just repeating it. And whenever you do that, you grow and you grow and you grow. And so whenever it comes to tribe and the life of tribe this year, I think one of the things that we should really encourage each other in is becoming more like Jesus, and set the bar actually quite high for that. And so I guess the question we would love to ask you is, what would it look like for you all as a tribe to become more like Jesus this time next year? And what does that require? Like, what habits or practices, what daily rituals can we put into place in our lives and encourage each other to do so, so that this time next year, the fruit of God's Spirit are growing in us naturally and automatically. But it all does come down to imitation and repetition. And as we do this, we become like Jesus, and therefore we become the kind of people that love God and love people really, really well.
Yeah. Amazing. We're just going to hand over to your tribe leaders that are going to lead you in some even better conversation than this. Hopefully this has been helpful, and we'll see you guys soon.